bit by the bed with the thing that you made.
Yeah.
With the opening doors, and that will be regarding your perfectionism in that room. And then we'll go on and we'll talk about secret hiding places in the house. And with the sequence before that, 6B, I'll also start in that area of the house. But what I'm thinking I might just touch on is the finished nature of the room, where you sort of don't see the finished nature of the room because what's foregrounded is the clutter. So then when you, like we're always in the stuff we've filmed so far, you almost can't see the unfinishedness as well, because that's just hidden by bits of wood or whatever. So there's always that foregrounding of something else besides whether a space is finished or unfinished or whatever that gradient might be.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking about.
Leaving the office. This is the top of the stairwell. My parents' bedroom is to the right. These two rooms are probably the most finished of the house. Anyway, I was fixating on this because I was looking for evidence of my 6-year-old hands, because I ruined the plaster here when I was young by pressing my fingers into it. After a while of filming this, I realised Dad must have repaired this damage a while ago. See there, I drift away from it. This yellow will cover all the walls of the entire stairwell eventually. It's a heritage colour of some kind. Dad likes to use colours that are contemporary with the age of the house. I like how here we have the painted wall and dado rail, changing in stages to undercoat on the walls with an undercoated dado rail. Then the dado rail is just plain wood, as if transitioning through levels of more and more unfinish as we go down, especially as right at the bottom the dado rail peters out to a mere pencil line, as you've already seen. A gap here, where my 6-year-old self scribbled on the wall above the telephone, except it's not there anymore. I mean, the scribble isn't there anymore, but it is a different telephone as well. I like that about being a child, though. Scribbling on things. Taking anything that felt overly earnest and just scribbling on it. Perhaps I was trying to make things continue to fit. As Dad was moving towards finishing different parts of the house, I would move them back again, unfinish them. I didn't see this as hindering progress or vandalising anything. I would have seen it as keeping them familiar or something, I don't know. Keeping them alive, perhaps. I feel now that scribbles, finger marks and so on are very alive. Marks everywhere. I love them. But whether it makes a home for everybody, I don't know. I suppose it means nothing can settle. That's the pencil line I mentioned when we were upstairs. You've seen it many times. I've also taken you here and shown you this. And this. And this. But this time, instead of taking you this way, or this way, or to this, I'm going to take you in here. I remember the sink being just there, and there's a bath just there.
Yeah.
And I remember all of this. I was always fascinated by this wall because it's basically polystyrene.
Yes, it is.
And I used to pick at it. Some of these marks will be. Some of these marks will be marks that I did when I was how What year did you move out of this bathroom?
Well, we used this bathroom until the upstairs bathroom was finished, and the upstairs bathroom I did after I came back from Newcastle. So that was in 1988, when we'd been in the house for 10 years.
Okay. Well, some of these little pics, not all of them, but some of them will be marks that I made when I was 6 or something.
Yeah.
Now what am I doing? Remember this? This piece Dad made to go over the end of that stone skirting? This end piece. The furthest diagonal from my parents' bedroom door, I'm not sure why that happened. This was my first bedroom. I was in here from birth until the age of 7. Yeah, before I started filming this, Dad was saying this room hasn't really changed very much since I was a child. This is kind of the first time I was looking around this room since then, actually. And I think it has changed quite a lot. A lot of it's to do with the extra plaster work that's happened in here, and maybe in the last 7 years or so. For example, the ceiling, which has all been repaired, that used to be purple, the same as that, above the horizontal line. And it used to have all holes in it and things. But you see that cloud of white there around that radiator bracket? That's the kind of mark that was in this room before I was born, or at least in the earliest years of my life. I think Dad probably did those while he was installing central heating in the house. And for Dad, his own marks in the house, whether they were done 30 years ago or 7 years ago, are roughly the same. But for me, it makes all the difference between a room that I recognise and a room that I don't recognise. Whenever I'm examining footage that I've been filming at my parents' house, I notice little variations in background details that were not brought to my attention at the time. Sometimes I'll notice, for example, that a gap or uneven surface has been filled in with plaster, or that a new hole has appeared, or that something has been moved. Last time I looked at that, it had, I'm looking at that switch there, it had all those slots open. I didn't see so you've just put polyfiller there, and or whatever it is. It's little subtle changes every time.
Yeah, well, there are these. Also, I mean, that's been, I've replastered that, although I've not yet. It's a bit rough, so I haven't done it that well. But that needs to be polyfilled. I mean, a lot of this was just a case of saying, "Oh, I've mixed too much plaster. Where can I use it?"
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the feeling, because it just there's little. It doesn't look like you've done it on purpose, or you would have done more.
I mean, along here, it's just sort of, oh yes, okay, I've got the plaster to use up. Let's use it up.
Yeah. The process of filming whenever I visit has helped me realise that I experience the fabric of this house as a series of endless layers. Layers of time that sit on top of one another like transparencies, augmenting and supplementing earlier layers. Anything new, whether it's an addition or a subtraction, I count as a further layer. Every time I visit, new layers have been added. This is how I look at this house. This wall always grabs my attention whenever I come in here. This marginalia, I scribbled all this when I was growing up in this room. I have no way of telling any of these scribbles apart, so whether I was 2, 4 or 6 when I did specific ones, they've all blended together. This plaster must have come later than that scribble, because it overlaps part of it. This plaster is probably the same age as that plaster, and has pencil marks on top of it, presumably written once the plaster had dried. End. End. Pretend. Friend. What's that say? Things always being obliterated by the things, covered over. New layers sit upon earlier layers. They sometimes comment upon past layers. They modify and correct them. But they communicate with future layers too. They leave gaps that are to be filled in later, notes and diagrams on surfaces that will eventually become embedded in walls, plans that were later completed or changed. Listen.
Yes, I was talking about the guest room annex. There's the corner of there's the chimney breast in the guest room. Conveniently, this is a 6B pencil, so it shows up good and black. Sorry, deeper than that. And there's the door. Forget that bit. Forget that bit. It actually comes more like that.
To anybody in a hurry, this all probably amounts to just a wall, and in a finished house, this would be just a wall. To me, though, like the entire house, this wall exists as layers of time. Layers of time are what the house leaves open by being continually unfinished.
On this surface here,
Which surface?
this surface here, I had stripped the paint off it and had a coat of primer on it, and the coat of primer is still there. But the first time I did it, I stripped that primer, and when I came to look at it, I discovered that scratched into that freshly primed surface was a noughts and crosses thing, which had been done by Chris.
Really?
It was, it was not that deep, but it was enough to show. And I thought if I just paint over the top of it, it will still show. And I was so cross that he'd scribed into a surface which I'd stripped and painted and was sort of effectively being on the way to being finished, that I gave him a relatively worn out bit of sandpaper and I said, stand there and sandpaper that surface until that mark's completely gone. And it was a punishment. It really was. Anyway, he diligently sanded away there, and actually there's no trace of those noughts and crosses there left anymore. But I feel badly about that now, because I could have said, you actually mustn't put marks on stuff which I've just done, if you don't mind, please. But here's a fresher piece of sandpaper which would get rid of that mark much more quickly. But I got so cross with the fact that he'd damaged something which I'd only just finished doing, that I'm afraid I punished him rather badly for that.
Your military background.
That's what it was, yeah.
You know, there was something in the... I remember being told off as well for if you know the hall, just below the light switches in the hall. Do you remember that? Do you remember me pressing my hands or fingers into the plaster below the light switches in the hall?
No, I don't remember that.
Should we go down there and see if there's any trace of them?
Yeah.
Probably isn't, actually, because they've been redone since. The plaster's been redone since.
Well, of course, that hall has been. I'm not sure.
Let's have a look.
We'll have a look anyway.
There was my scribble on that wall that you're just there, of course.
Missing from there now. We can't find the piece of wallpaper. Now, I guess you're talking about here, not there, are you?
That's right, here. Now, I can't find any trace of it, but I do remember you This is when I realised, actually, I must have been about 7, because you basically said I was hindering your progress on the house by disrupting the fresh plaster.
Yeah.
And that's something that stayed with me, because up until then I didn't really appreciate that there was any, the house already was quite rough everywhere and quite unfinished and worn and sort of, where it wasn't, even when it was coming together, it was also coming undone at different times. You kind of see the mould appearing on new things and so on.
Yeah.
So that when, in fact, as I look at this, so I didn't really understand until you explained it to me that I was undoing your work that you were trying to get done. And actually, I can see there is a lighter quality to certain parts of this. It's hard.
It has been polyfilled, and I don't know why. You're right. It could be that when you say fingers pressing in, it could be that you just scratched. Because there is, and I'd never really noticed that, there is in this area polyfiller. And yeah, there's bits there. Yeah, so maybe it wasn't just pressing your fingers in. Maybe it was actually a whole lot of scratching in the fresh plaster. Because it is in this area that there is polyfiller. And it may be that that's, and I mean, there's some bits where the scratches are still there. Well, I'm blowed, I'd forgotten completely about that. I had no idea. I mean, I'd forgotten you'd done it. I don't remember doing it. And now that, it's only now that you pointed out, I can see the scratches here too. So it wasn't fingers being pressed into it, it was actually gouging. Yeah, well, I'm blowed.
Yeah.
That explains something else which I was completely unaware of. But up here, of course, it hasn't happened, it's just down there.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a different looking texture. It looks white.
And now that I look, I mean, now that you pointed it out and I look, I can see the polyfiller where I tried to minimise the damage which you've done. It'll all disappear because my plan now is to put some battens on this wall and insulation and dry line it.
Oh, okay.
Well, I can't really remember very much about it from when you did it, except that I realised that as you'd scribbled on something which was going to be removed, there was no point in quickly doing. There was no urgency to remove it, and actually I became quite fond. As time went on, I became quite fond of the little things which you left. Which you drew around the place, and recognising by that time that progress was going to be very, very slow, and there was time to enjoy your graffiti for what they were before I then got to the stage of covering them up or undoing them or repairing them. But I don't particularly remember this one. I remember this one more for you wanting to preserve it and scrape it off.
I was wanting to preserve it because you liked it, I think.
Yeah. Somewhere in the house, and I'm not sure, I've got no idea where it is now, but there used to be what I think was known as a mandala.
Yes, that's right.
On the wallpaper behind the loo, upstairs loo, which had been done by the daughters of the previous house. And I kept that when I stripped that and built the new cupboard in. Did the pipe work and effectively overhauled that loo. I carefully removed that piece of wallpaper with the mandala on it and put it away somewhere safe. I don't know where it is now.
That's what must have given me the idea to scrape that bit of graffiti off. You must have told me or something.
Yeah, maybe.
And to preserve that graffiti, which I also can't now locate.
Yeah.
So that's sort of in a similar way. Things being preserved but end up still getting sort of lost.
Yeah.
Well, I call this the greatest Christmas musical Christmas present of all time.
an end piece. But for now, it's not the end of anything. Sometimes, in the process of making this film, or whatever it is, I notice that I'm filming the moments that create these layers of time. Normally moments themselves go and are preserved only as traces in the house itself, but look. This captures the moment when this happened.
Going. Go.
The moment itself is gone, and the effort to capture it is imperfect, but it could only happen once, and this record is what exists.
Gone. Gone.
And this is the moment when my dad made
Put my fingers
these
down there. I
marks.
could just
Marks you might never see,
enlarge it, so that
but
paint
they are
has
there,
got no adhesion
and will
whatsoever.
probably be visible for a long time.
If I take a proper scraper to it, right there,
And can you point at the plug?
you can see that little plug.
Yeah.
This
sticks
sanding
out.
of
It's
wood,
just a little bit proud.
the process of making something fit, this could not have been done again. And if this had been broken by now,
Handily adjacent.
I would have
That's
said,
the one which you've filmed
this is when
before.
this broken thing was broken.
Oh, not broken, thank goodness.
But it
was
wasn't
ceramic,
broken.
so it would break. That's the 1920s fuse box, and I'll put that back up there.
Hey, guess what I'm doing? On my 6th birthday I received this audio cassette recorder, and I became obsessed with recording my voice and any sounds I could make. Most of these tapes no longer exist. I remember recording over one of them because it ended with my dad suddenly entering and telling me off for recording a tape instead of putting my shoes on to go to the pub.
Sorry, Dad, can I be
And every time I heard that tape it was like being told off all over again. So I recorded over it. But this tape still exists. The first tape I ever made, aged 6. It is the sound of myself between these walls nearly 30 years ago, appreciating for the first time that moments can be partially captured and then played back. Before this specific recording, I had no notion that anything heard or seen, even on the radio or television, was ever anything other than a live, ephemeral experience.
Ooh! Guess who? Me.
We probably all have recordings of ourselves at a young age, showing off into microphones, so I won't play all of it.
Won't he? Guess who? Me.
Scribbling over my overly earnest, boring older self, droning away.
I'm going Don't be rude to me, said Mummy one day. Said Daddy today. Hoot, said Fastface. And bang, I said. And when I went, something in my mouth. The gem, purple floor, or doing painting on the wall. And
I am scribbling with sound, as I realise that I can keep not only words, but spontaneous, unplanned moments in this way. And having preserved these moments, I'm building on them, as if in layers, repeating them, to change them.
well, I didn't know that because something in my mouth. Gem. I'll do a painting on the wall. scratching on the radiator. Drawing on the wood. drawing on my face. Now what am I doing? It's not anyone walking through dead leaves, no. It's me scratching my shoulder.
Some of those scribbles on that wall, or perhaps some of the scribbles on the other walls of this room currently obscured by wood, were created while that sound was happening. And I repeat,
Jam doing a drawing on the toilet. And a drawing on the radiator. Hey, guess what I'm doing? No, it's not somebody walking through dead leaves. It's me. Jamming my mouth. Bye.
and that's where my 6-year-old voice ends. There are no further recordings of me at that age. The scribbles in this room and that recording exist together, but they don't complete each other, I don't think, because they no longer match. The room has moved on, and the recording is of a ghost, a version of me I'll never get back. That might sound sad, but it's not sad. It's not sad that we get older and can't go back to the way things were. I think if we stay unfinished and open, the layers of what we've been never fully disappear anyway. This end. I like to repeat what can only occur once.
Hold on. Okay.
Layers that sit over the same space.
Okay, right with me.
Here, a bottle that's been around for a long time and can only be opened once. I like to repeat, to make these things last. I like things not to end. An end piece. But here it's not the end of anything. For now, it is not ending. Listen. When I was telling my dad about my plans for this sequence, he said that once it was fixed in place, this end piece wouldn't be coming back down again in his lifetime. I said, I know. I was thinking that this message to somebody perhaps 50, 100 years from now might turn this end piece into the beginning of something for them. It's time to put it back in place.
good book. Not for me. Bye. I mean, bye. Or shall I say, bye.